NC pork, good for the plate, great for the state. Welcome to the David Glenn Show here on the North Carolina Sports Network. I'm Mike Waddell, and in just a few minutes, my partner David Glenn will join in as we tackle the subject of the great reformation of college athletics in the wake of the recent House settlement and the rise of a new governing body replacing more or less the NCAA. That's called the College Sports Commission. Before we do that, it's important to remember it's barbecue season right now in the bold North State, and that's a reminder that North Carolina pork isn't just delicious, it drives our economy with a $10.4 billion economic impact and over 44,000 jobs. Pork is essential right here in the bold North State. We invite you to check out our new content series, Bold North Barbecue State, over the summer, as that leads directly into the Pineys, the North Carolina Sports Awards, and they are coming up on Wednesday, July 16th. Now, the Pineys recognize the best of the best in the past year of North Carolina sports, including the top winners in 5 categories. Athlete of the Year, presented by NC Pork. Coach of the Year, presented by Steeple, the Founders Group. Team of the Year, presented by Atlantic Tire and Service. Event of the Year, presented by NC by Train. And Moment of the Year, presented by Brentwood. Be sure and follow us on social media under the handle of @the_NC_Sportsnet on X, Instagram, and Facebook, and of course our YouTube channel, which is closing in now on 34,000 subscribers in only 2 years of existence. It's all made possible by NC Pork. Good for the plate, great for the state. We are now joined, as always, by the namesake of the show, the 2-time North Carolina Sportscaster of the Year, entrepreneur, practicing attorney, and my partner here on the North Carolina Sports Network, the one and only David Glenn. And DG, as a former director of athletics and active consultant still to this day in college athletics with several schools, I was in Orlando earlier this summer for the recent NACDA convention. It's the main annual get-together for college athletics administrators from around the nation, and the collective looks on the faces of these college sports power brokers was bewildered, beaten, and more or less stumped as to what is going to transpire over the coming year with this new model of oversight, the House settlement, and everything like that. I mean, the very foundation of college sports as we know it has been shaken to the core. The NCAA's House settlement is more than just a legal headline, which is right up your alley. It represents a full-blown transformation of how college athletics will be structured, funded, and governed. If you're a fan of the Tar Heels, the Blue Devils, the Wolfpack, the Deacs, or any school here in the great state of North Carolina, it will impact your team and the athletes and the coaches and you as a fan. So let's start, David, with a big picture view of how the NCAA's House settlement has fundamentally changed college sports.
It's great to be with you again. I'm so happy that you, as a longtime athletic director, and me, both as that attorney and also a 30-plus year journalist who has covered these sorts of issues very closely. I'm glad we can get together on this topic because there's just a lot of confusion out there and even some misinformation out there. But to answer your question, I'd say the starting point for all of this is that the NCAA, the 30,000 feet view, if you will, the NCAA is an organization that was created in 1906. So almost 120 years ago, that organization is finally allowing its member institutions for the first time ever to pay cold, hard cash directly from those schools' athletic department revenues into the pockets of those schools' athletes. Just remember, though, that there is going to be a lot of variety, for example, among conferences. This is going to be handled much differently in the Atlantic Coast Conference, say, than in the American Athletic Conference or the Sun Belt Conference or even the Big East Conference. There's also going to be a lot of variety among universities. Duke, NC State, UNC, and Wake Forest, for example, that you just mentioned, have decisions to make related to the House settlement that are in very practical ways much different than the decisions being made at Appalachian State, Charlotte, and East Carolina, which are also different from the decisions being made at, say, non-football schools like a UNC Asheville or a UNC Wilmington in our backyard, which are also different than the decisions being made at, say, a North Carolina Central, which has a smaller budget even compared to most of the aforementioned schools. There's also going to be a lot of variety from sport to sport. So football will be impacted in different ways than men's basketball, which will be impacted in different ways than women's basketball or baseball, which will be impacted in different ways than the 12 or the 20 or the 30 other sports on any given campus. There is also going to be a lot of variety from athlete to athlete. Whether we are looking backward at the 2.78 billion with a B dollar settlement that will be paid to college athletes who competed in some previous years, or whether we're looking forward at how many of these athletes are going to be compensated by their schools starting basically right now with this 2025-2026 academic year. Those various decisions and those various numbers will be all over the map during this first year of this new system. And we already know that they're going to change from year to year. For example, the 20.5 million or whatever the final number turns out to be, that's per school. The revenue sharing cap that has been tossed around, that number, 20.5 million, will be in place for this 2025-26 academic year, but we already know that that number will go up every year. And by almost a decade from now, that annual revenue sharing cap per school per year is expected to be well over $30 million per school per year. So back to your original question, the starting point is the same. For the first time ever, NCAA rules now enable colleges to share some of their sports-related revenue with their own athletes in the form of cash payments from within the university itself. That is absolutely, positively a seismic shift in how college sports have gone over this past century plus in the United States.
David, how is this new world different from the NIL landscape that we've experienced over these last few years?
Well, two main things here. Number one, to answer that direct question, the difference is that now the money is coming directly from within the university. They're calling this new approach to paying college athletes revenue sharing instead of pure NIL. But the compensation definitely includes the name, image, likeness concept. Over these past 4 years, 100% of name, image, likeness money came from external or outside the university sources. And I think many fans heard about the concept of, say, college-specific collectives. You know, there's the One Pack NIL or Savage Wolves at NC State for those athletes. There was the Carolina NIL or Heels for Life collective for UNC athletes. Those raised and distributed NIL money specifically for athletes at that specific school and only that school. And maybe the fans assumed that those organizations were an official arm of the university. They were not. They may have communicated with their partner university. They certainly cheered for that university. They did work that benefited that university, but they were absolutely positively independent outside the university, third parties raising and distributing that money among those athletes. It was easier to see NIL money over these last 4 years as outside money when it came directly to an athlete from a hotel chain or a car dealership or an energy drink or a clothing line. But even the money that went through the collective was third-party money in the eyes of the NCAA. The only difference was that the collective kind of served as an intermediary between those companies and those athletes in those cases. Number two, it is very important to remember that the new House settlement does not, N-O-T not, put an end to these collectives or any other third-party NIL money. So moving forward, college athletes now have these two potential revenue streams, even beyond, their scholarship and the cost of attendance and the Alston adjustment, et cetera. Or even other government sponsored money that athletes and non-athletes can get. This new world that we're living in is going to allow two revenue streams in the form of new revenue sharing possibilities directly from their own school's athletic department, and the continuance of at least the possibility of that third party NIL money that has already been flowing over these last 4 years, as you said. The external money, by the way, is going to be treated very differently moving forward than the way it was treated these past 4 years. And that is going to be a fascinating thing to watch, because the athletes getting money straight from the university, that's going to be easy to understand. It's going to be relatively uncomplicated. But I'm not sure folks understand fully the nature of the rest of this world, because in the new world, third-party money is going to be scrutinized in a different way and to an infinitely greater degree than it was in the first 4 years of NIL.
NC Port, raising the bacon, raising the bar.
Barbecue is the culture of North Carolina. It is the embodiment of who we are, and it dates back for decades across North Carolina. That's what we do at community events. You have a wedding, you have a pig picking. You volunteer firefighter fundraiser, you have a pig picking. That's what all of this is. And what we got to see today is really 23 of the best, probably the best in the world at cooking whole hogs. And what a great day it is.
This segment brought to you by our great friends at Atlantic Tire and Service, where DG and his family take all of their vehicles for routine maintenance, service needs, and a world-class selection of new tires. Atlantic Tire and Service, your one-stop tire and auto repair provider with highly trained technicians and a sales and support staff that are second to none. They've grown to 6 Triangle area locations, 2 in Raleigh, 2 in Cary, 1 in Durham, and 1 in Wake Forest. You can learn more online at AtlanticTireOnline.com.
We're headed into our 3rd year of operations here on the North Carolina Sports Network. And for the first time here in the fall of 2025, the North Carolina Sports Network has put in a proposal to a North Carolina college athlete. We are in the process right now of dealing with a collective. I can tell you, as a former AD, it is a weird situation. Great people, but it's just strange to be outlining how I would pay an athlete to do something that, for the better part of 28 years that I was involved in college athletics, they were doing in exchange for their scholarship. So I have to ask you, with third-party money like what we're talking about, paying a potential college athlete partner, would any of that third-party NIL money count towards the school's $20.5 million revenue sharing cap, or is that still considered a separate entity?
This may be the only short answer I give you today, Mike, and I hope to make it short. Only internal money counts toward any individual school's revenue sharing cap. Whether the final number turns out to be exactly 20.5 million, there are some folks who think when they finish crunching the numbers, it'll be a little higher than that. But the bottom line answer is no, that third-party money does not count toward the cap, and there is no cap per se on that external money. Although, again, that third-party money is going to be regulated much more strictly moving forward than it was over these past 4 years.
If a player had $1 million NIL deal last year and that same booster or company wants to renew it, how is that going to be handled under this new House settlement?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked this one because this is one of the more fascinating and maybe controversial aspects of this new college sports world. There are already complaints about it, hasn't even started yet officially. And there are many, many people within college sports, Mike, probably some fellow ADs that you know, who are really skeptical about how this is going to work. And there are probably going to be lawsuits, and there's certainly going to be arbitration at some point as a result of this new approach. But I'll try my best to paint the big picture for you here. The internal, again, revenue sharing money straight from your school's athletic department, it will not be reviewed on a case by case basis. And I think the reason for that is that if the school knows it's facing a cap, whether it's 20.5 million or some other slightly larger number in year one, it has no incentive to falsely inflate the value of any single athlete's compensation. The school's not going to give someone, let's say, $1 million from athletic department funds unless they believe that the athlete is actually bringing an extraordinary amount of value. If your entire internal revenue sharing budget for, let's say, men's basketball turns out to be $4 million, that coach is naturally going to be really, really careful about giving too big of a chunk of that 4 million to any single player because he has a team to build. So whether it's the NCAA or the power conferences, they're not really worried about policing the details of this internal money under that 20 plus million dollar cap. However, starting with this 2025-2026 calendar year, for the first time, any external third-party deal where the value exceeds $600, that's a pretty low threshold. Any third-party deal where the value exceeds $600 will be subject to what they're calling a fair market value review process, and that did not happen over the last 4 years. This is basically a byproduct of the NCAA's desire, or more specifically, the Power Four conference's desire to separate actual business deals. Let's say where a company pays an athlete $100,000 in exchange for $100,000 worth of social media promotions of the company's products or services, plus maybe some speaking engagements, an endorsement in a TV or a radio commercial, an autograph session, or other personal appearance. If the value of what that person's bringing to the company is arguably around $100,000 and the company's paying the athlete $100,000, well, there's no problem there. But this new system wants to distinguish that kind of fair trade concept that I just described from basically buying players or anything close to the pay for play concept that the NCAA as an organization has been trying to avoid for decades and still is trying to avoid. So in an example, that $1 million NIL deal last year that you gave, it wasn't really scrutinized by anyone this past calendar year, this past academic year. That's one reason that many commissioners, coaches, and athletic directors were calling it the Wild Wild West. They knew that many people and companies were essentially buying players on behalf of their favorite school because they wanted to see their team or their school do well in a particular sport. And they didn't even necessarily care whether there was a lot of substance to the deal, whether they were getting those appearances, that social media promotion, those other details, in response or in exchange for that $1 million compensation. There was no official mechanism over these last 4 years to separate a fair market value deal from a buying a player just because I want to win type of contract, again, from a collective or from a third party. Moving forward, the same $1 million third-party NIL deal will be scrutinized, although interestingly, it is not the NCAA itself that is going to handle this new task. The same 5 leagues, Mike, that were the defendants alongside the NCAA in the House legal case that has become famous. It's the ACC, the Big 12, the Big 10, the SEC, and believe it or not, the old Pac-12 does technically still exist and was a defendant in that case. Those 5 leagues have created something brand new called the College Sports Commission. This group will report directly to the commissioners of those 5 so-called power conferences, and this College Sports Commission will be the enforcement agent. It will govern all schools that opt into the house settlement, not just members of those 5 leagues. And we'll get to the opt-in, opt-out situation a little bit later, but the overwhelming majority of the schools that we cover, including all of the schools in the power conferences, uh, are either automatically opted in, those members of those 5 leagues, or they've already chosen to opt in, most of the other schools that we follow. We'll get to that in a little bit. So the brand new College Sports Commission has contracted with Deloitte, the famous accounting firm, to implement a new program called NIL Go. And it's essentially an online clearinghouse for all these third-party NIL deals that are valued at $600 or more. If an athlete at any school signs a deal worth $600 or more and does not report it, that athlete can jeopardize his or her college eligibility, and that school could face penalties from this newly created enforcement arm, the College Sports Commission. The actual NIL Go portal was launched in mid-June, right here in 2025, and many of these proposed deals are already going through this vetting process. So we're off and running in this new world. It's just that we don't have approvals and rejections of these NIL deals that have been proposed just yet, even as college football season isn't too far away.
And in the case of our deal, we made a presentation to the collective. The collective is then meeting with the athlete. If the athlete likes what we have proposed, then it goes to NIL Go. So we here on the North Carolina Sports Network are going to have a very, very inside look as to how this works, and we'll be able to report back to you right here on the North Carolina Sports Network, both over the summer and into the fall and college football seasons. Now, what have these schools, David, especially their collectives, been informed about how these new rules will be enforced?
Well, the fair market value concept is one that has sent a lightning bolt through the I would say the entire college sports world, although I am not sure how many of these details have been widely reported in the media. I have not seen it many places, whereas you at your summit in Florida with all those other athletic directors, I'm sure we're just pounded over and over with some of these details. But here's a great example of something I think 90+% of even passionate college sports fans might not yet fully understand. Deloitte went back and collected as many NIL deals as possible from these past 4 years with college athletes. They also researched NIL type deals. They're not called that for professional athletes, but they researched, how much is a professional athlete typically paid for these social media promotions or these personal appearances or these autograph signings or anything else that's similar to what's being proposed at the college level. And Deloitte, the accounting firm, has actually created algorithms designed to reflect what that real marketplace is out there in the real world, the value of doing this for this sized company, given the size of your social media platform and even the fame of the team that you play for, and even your prominence or not on that team. All of these, of course, factor into how your NIL value as a star player might be different than my NIL value if I'm a guy on the end of the bench. Or our value playing for football team or men's basketball team is going to be perceived in most cases as far greater than those playing one of the Olympic sports, for example. So Deloitte has studied 4 years of college-style NIL, studied the broader sports marketplace for how athletes are compensated in all sorts of contexts, because they just wanted to see how those deals at the college level over the last 4 years would have been viewed if this new NIL Go system had been in place, and more importantly, this new fair market value analysis had been in place. Among the results of Deloitte's research are these tasty tidbits, all of which have been communicated to you and other athletic directors, and through those ADs, certainly to those in the collective world and those in the broader business community who have been working with college athletes. Listen to this. Number one, roughly 70% of all NIL deals that went through collectives in recent years would have been rejected by fair market value analysis. In other words, the same deals these schools were getting through I shouldn't say the schools, the collectives, third parties were giving to college athletes in recent years, more than 2/3 of them were not fair market value. They were something closer to, let's just give this dude a lot of money so he'll play for my school or my favorite team. Meanwhile, when they studied business deals, NIL deals through public companies, 90% of those looking backward would have been approved. Now, why do we think that's the case? Well, public companies, if you're a public hotel chain or some other public company out there, you're responsible to your shareholders. So you can't just go out there and throw $2 million at the star quarterback or the star point guard that you hope to play for some team. Even if you're the CEO of that public company, you have to answer to your shareholders. You have to answer to your board of directors. They probably are not in love with the idea of you simply sprinkling millions on your alma mater or your favorite school, right? So again, 90% of NIL deals looking backward that went through public companies would be approved under this new fair market value analysis. It makes sense, right? Again, those folks were looking for deals that would benefit their companies, their public companies. And anybody who went too far out of bounds probably would be called out by their own board of directors or their own shareholders. So again, only 10% of those public company deals to college athletes in previous years would have been rejected under this new system. Well, 70% of the collective deals would have been rejected by this new fair market value analysis. And these collectives are going to have to keep that in mind moving forward. You can't just buy a player. You have to offer something that reasonably estimates the value of whatever services you're asking that athlete to perform in return. Again, social media promotions, personal appearances, autograph signings, etc. Meanwhile, when the Deloitte folks scrutinized the deals that were done at the college level, in their estimation, 99% of those deals, Mike, looking backward, would have been valued in this fair market value analysis at less than $100,000. 99% would be valued at less than $100,000. Well, we saw enough $250,000 deals, $500,000 deals, $750,000 deals, $1 million, $2 million, $3 million deals. We saw enough that, again, that looks, sounds, and smells, in most cases, more like buying a player rather than offering compensation for services in return. The same folks at Deloitte said that looking back, about 80% of all NIL deals, these are done with public companies, over the past 4 years, were valued at less than $10,000. So again, public companies mostly staying within the rules, even looking backward. Collectives most often going over the top and just trying to buy players for their favorite school. So what does this mean in practical terms? It means that looking back, collectives were buying players far more often than they were engaging in fair market value deals. Nobody's going to get into trouble for what happened these last 4 years, by the way. Congratulations, those players beat the system. They got their exaggerated money, and the schools were able to benefit from those players' services without paying them anything directly. Again, it was third-party money. But moving forward, it's not going to be so easy to beat the system because, again, every NIL deal worth $600 or more will have to pass this fair market value test to be approved. So let's say your original plan at an ACC school was to use $4 million in internal revenue sharing money, but also $4 million in external NIL style money for your men's basketball program. That would give you a sport-specific NIL budget of $8 million. Now, obviously, your men's basketball coach and general manager have been throwing around various dollar values for months on the recruiting trail and in the transfer portal. That $4 million in internal money can be spread around however those coaches and GMs wish, with no real scrutiny and no potential rules violations and no fair market value analysis. But those same coaches and GMs are going to have to be careful about how they even mention much less talk specifically about external money. Because if Deloitte says that 99% of those previous NIL deals through public companies justified compensation of only, less than $100,000, and we know there were a lot of folks getting paid a lot more than that, especially in football and men's basketball, and especially through collectives, you're going to run a very high risk as a coach or GM of some of those third-party NIL deals, especially the collective deals, getting rejected by the new Deloitte clearinghouse this summer, which is going to lead to a lot of very unhappy athletes who thought they were going to get a lot more money if it unfolds that way. We'll see how it all plays out, but you can expect lawsuits, and this new College Sports Commission already has an arbitration process in place that apparently includes some level of subpoena power, which is a very powerful tool that, for example, the NCAA enforcement staff in my 37 years covering such things has never had at its disposal when investigating possible rules violations. It is a lot less complicated to get to the truth of any matter when you have subpoena power. So maybe the enforcement of this stuff, fair market value and otherwise, NIL Go and otherwise, will be more successful than the NCAA's historically poor track record of finding the truth during those rules investigations of the past. But this is just another example, Mike. We are living in a brand new world, and unless schools have had plenty of time to prepare for this, because the original approval of the House settlement happened last October. The final approval came much more recently, but they've had many months to make sure that they were setting themselves up to succeed, but also follow the rules in this new system. So it's going to be fascinating to see how many of these NIL deals are rejected when it goes through the NIL Go clearinghouse over these coming weeks and months.